Hey, Nathan here, and welcome back to another tutorial from the XNA Tower Defense series. Last tutorial, we discussed the user interface and got those ready to go for part 2, which we're still waiting for the map class to finish up on those classes. Now, this tutorial, we're going to work on the player class and the session class. We should be able to do the session class fully and not worry about part 2. So anyway, let's get started with the player class. It's just going to be very simple. Just 2 properties. Of course, a player will have money and the towers you have placed for the current map. So money cannot be in the negative, so we're going to do a unsigned integer money. So it's always positive. Get and set. Not the private set here, just get and set. Public list of tower, placed tower, with an S at the end, placed towers, get and set. That is it for the player class. For version 1.0, we will extend this in a later patch and update. But for now, let's go to the session class. Alright, so the session is going to be one of the most important classes in the game, where it's going to have access to the current map, our current player objects, so our current money and our placed towers, and it's going to have access to a string that displays our money and the current selected tower we have, the current user interface object, if the game is paused, the current speed of the game, and all that stuff. Not only that, the session will be responsible for watching our actions. If we buy a tower or sell a tower, the session throws events to identify for every listener, hey, I bought a tower, or hey, I sold the tower. So we're going to have to deal with that as well. That's a pretty basic thing to do. We create delegates and events, and we'll get to that. But at the very top where we have the using statements, let's just add one using for Microsoft.xna.framework. And that should be the only using statement we will need. Alright, now above the public class session and below the namespace, so after the first opening curly bracket here, just above public class session, let's add public class tower event args. It's a derivative, so add a space colon event args. Opening and closing curly brackets like that. Public tower t semicolon. And then the actual constructor, public tower event args, opening parentheses, tower t, closing parentheses, opening and closing curly brackets, and this dot t is equal to t. Alright, so what is an event args? Whenever we throw a event, we need to use a event arguments. We can use the standard event args, or we can create our own custom ones, which is what this is doing. When we throw an event args, and when the session throws an event, it mostly deals with the tower. So when it throws the tower event, it needs to have access to what the tower object is that is responsible for that event, or is part of the event. So if we clicked a tower, it needs access to the tower that we clicked, so every listener can have access to the tower we clicked by the tower event args object we will create when we throw the event. So this just gives us a way to store the tower we have clicked, purchased, or sold, and give it to every single listener that signed up for that event. So that's what the event args does. We can use the basic event args, or we can create our own custom ones like what I did here. Alright, so go into the actual class now. we're going to create delegates to handle our events. So public delegate void purchase tower event handler, opening parentheses, object sender, what through these events. So in this case it'll be a session object, but we're just doing an object sender here. And now here's where we have the tower event args. I just like to do the first letter in each word, so T. Or if you want to make it also with the delegate, you can put purchase tower event logs, P, T, E, A, and that'll be it. So either way is up to you. Purchase tower event logs or tower event args, and you can abbreviate those. Or you can name it whatever else you want. Alright, so another delegate, void for cell tower event handler, object sender tower event args, cell tower event args, so STEA, closing parentheses and semicolon. Now these are responsible for throwing the events, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. Alright, so like I said, this will have access to the active map, and it will be a public property with a get and private set. It will have access to the money display and towers display. I was going to modify the game engine before I started and actually talk about memory management. And I decided that would not be the best thing to do, to have a poorly created code so I could discuss it later. So I'll discuss it now when it's the actual appropriate version. So why do we create these money displays and tower displays here? Towers display. So we create these because we have a set amount of money. Let's say $100. Then we have 2 towers placed. Now sometimes that may never update. You could walk away from the game and it can finish all the waves, and that would never change. However, every game loop, it's going to reference that money display in the draw method. It's going to go to the draw method and say, hey, how much money we have. The command info bar needs access to the money display and towers display. It needs access to see, so we can know how much money we have and we can know how many towers we placed. Now, the Space Shooter game and the Paddles game, anytime we needed access to a string, it would create it upon access. For example, let's say I needed the money display and I wanted to do the old way and only generate the string on access. So every game loop, when it gets to the draw method, it'll generate a new string object, and that new string object will be used in the command info bar. The next game loop, it'll generate a different string object that might be the exact same information in the previous game loop, but it will be creating a brand new string object. So that can go thousands of game loops, and we can have thousands of string objects just sitting there in memory waiting to be garbage collected. So for this engine, I decided I would be more memory management correct and actually generate this money display, and anytime we need access to the money display, it'll grab this string object. It will not create a brand new string object when we need it. When we need to get to the money display, it'll just grab the string object and display it. Now, anytime our money increases or decreases, this string object will change. But it is still better than every game loop. It's better than creating a brand new string object every single game loop. If we sell a tower, we need to create a new string because our money changed. Alright, so that's why we have a money display and towers display. It'll just save us all sorts of memory problems down the road. Especially with a game of this size that will eventually, I'm hoping, to be a full-fledged game in like version 2 or 2.x or something. I hope it to be a fully featured game that we can play for a couple hours, and it'll have like a campaign or something. So a game of that size, you want to be as concerned about memory as possible. Even in C# that has automatic memory garbage collection, and you don't have to worry about pointers and all that stuff. Even with C#, you need to be aware of memory. Because in the middle of your game and the garbage collection runs, it will create lag in your game. Alright, enough of that. Let's go on and continue on with the properties. So, as I mentioned, it will need access to the active player object. Get and private set. Okay, now the session needs to be aware of the selected tower. Whenever we click a tower in the active game window, in the active map window, I should say, we need to have access to that selected tower in the session object. This will also help the command info bar to determine if it's a selected tower or a purchased tower. And of course, anytime we have a tower defense type of game or anything, we need to have access to health. So get and private set. And that will be the lives we have left, 20 or so. And then again, we have a string for health display. Now comes the reference to the user interface, and I just call the object UI. It's very short. Everybody knows what UI means. Get and private set. Or you can write out the full user interface. It's your version of the game engine. You can do whatever you want. And now the game management. Is the game paused? What's the minimum speed we can achieve? What's the maximum? And what's the current speed of our game? So all those stuff. So public bool. Is the game paused? Public float. Min speed. What's the slowest we can have the game run at? When we click decrease speed in the command info bar, what's the slowest it can achieve? Public float speed. What's the current speed of our game? And public float max speed. When we click increase speed, what's the highest speed we can achieve? Okay, so just like the video manager, audio manager, screen system, there will only be one session object available for the entire game. So I'm going to be taking the singleton approach. That way we can always get access to the session object we're using. And finally, for the actual event stuff. So public event. And our handlers that we created above, which will be part of our throwing the event, we need to have handlers to do so. Purchase tower event handler. Tower purchased. Public event sell tower event handler, tower sold. And now standard, very basic events. We're going to use the very basic event handlers that we have in the past. Event handler, that's a very basic event handler. Health decreased. Alright, the reason we have a health increased, and there will be another one, but it will be for money increase. Money increase. So the reason we have these two things is so it can tell the user interface, the command info bar, to update those UI blocks and update those text objects we have in those UI blocks. So the UI blocks will sign up for these events. And there's one more event, public event handler, map finished. We will use this event to for a later patch when we have a game over screen or congratulations screen. We will use this event, and right now we're using it to just bring in the game over screen. Alright, so on to the methods. Public session, and we pass it the active map. Okay, so there will actually be a part 2 for this video. There are a few map properties and methods we need to end up using. So once we get the map finished, and we can go back and do part 2 of all these videos, and that should be it for the engine series. So let's go ahead and do the method bodies just like all the other part 1s, and we'll go from there. So public void set UI. We need to set the user interface when we pass it a new UI object. This.UI is equal to UI. So we pass it a UI object that we need, then we have it set what the user interface object we're using. And of course we have update, where we have game time. And then the basic methods that will cause the events to throw, which is purchase a tower, sell a tower, but we also need to select tower and deselect tower. So we need to have a select tower right here. Tower T. And then we have a deselected tower. So public void deselect tower. No parameters. Now when we purchase a tower, it is just handled by the game engine, so I'm doing internal instead of public here. So purchase tower, the tower we purchased, so tower T, and then where we want it to be in a point format, so point map location. And a few more stuff we need to handle for the towers, like upgrading towers. So internal void upgrade tower. The tower we want to upgrade. Internal void sell tower. The tower we want to sell. And the reason we have this is because we need to add money to our active player. We need to change the money display and change the tower display. So that's why we sell a tower when we pass it the tower object. Because we just need to change a few things. Alright, internal void decrease health int p T, the amount of health to change. So if it's a boss, we decrease it by twice the amount of normal enemies. And for right now, that's static in the engine. Internal, void, add money. Whenever we kill a monster, how much money is it going to give us? So we pass it the money we need to add so we can update our money display and the money in the active player object and stuff like that. Internal, void, increase speed. How much we want to increase. Internal, void, decrease speed. How much we want to decrease. And now we're back to game management stuff, so pause and resume. These are going to be public, so we can access them in our game side. Remember, internal will just work on the engine, but for public, we want it to work on the game side. So we want to call .pause, and we want to call .resume. Alright, you can save the class, and that should be it for this video for part 1 of this session. The player class is complete. It's only 2 properties. The session, we need to wait for the map class, which we'll probably get to fairly shortly. And I'll talk about that in the next video, which will be a 1.1 release video. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you're ready to start the actual fun code after the map class is finished. So I hope to see you next time.